In this series, I've explained 31 truths of fake news. As I said in the intro video, my aim is to help you spot and stop fake news, not to help you make it. I'll say it again, you should do the right thing.
And that's the double truth, Ruth.
So, what can we learn from these truths? How can we fight fake news? Now's the time for me to preach. Truth number 1, your senses are not so sensible. Be skeptical of what you see and hear. Our senses evolved millions of years ago in an environment extremely unlike the 21st century world. So it's not that surprising that they can be easily fooled. Never trust a single input. Just as you would get a second or third opinion about whether you need surgery, get a second or third version of events before making up your mind. Truth number 2, pictures are louder than words. Show, don't tell. Think like a marketer and bolster analysis with spectacle. A robust argument convinces people in the long term, but flashiness gets their attention in the short term, so they ever hear your argument. For example, to convince people of the seriousness of coronavirus, it's not enough to show them charts of increasing case counts. They'll quickly forget the data, but not if it's supplemented by images of people suffering in ICUs. Truth number 3, feelings trump facts. Use emotion to exalt accuracy, not to undermine it. Make people excited about seeking the truth. We'll never be cold, rational observers of the world, so rather than try to eliminate our feelings, we should use them to motivate our search for facts. A scientist embarking on a new research project is not a dispassionate automaton looking for data. They're an impassioned human being, excited to learn more. Feelings are not the enemy of facts. Truth number 4, we love to hate. Stay calm in the face of a frustrating world. Temper your anger and other strong emotions and recognize that other people try to use those emotions to manipulate you. Strategy wins in the end, and hate is not a strategy. Truth number 5, everyone wins, so everyone loses. Fake news is in part an incentives problem, so create new incentives. Prizes that reward accuracy, norms that condemn sensationalism, rules that treat misinformation like the pollution that it is. For example, you could create a Facts Over Fiction annual award that goes to the journalist and news organization that stayed furthest from sensationalism and closest to the truth. People care about status, so let's make status a function of integrity. Truth number 6, there are no facts, only beliefs. Of course there actually are facts, hence my tongue-in-cheek video title, Fact, There Are No Facts. But you should recognize that beliefs are often amazingly disconnected from facts. Take Americans and coronavirus as an example. In early June 2020, when about 1,000 Americans were dying every day from COVID-19, a Pew Research survey found that 25% of US adults thought that it was definitely or probably true that the pandemic was intentionally planned by powerful people. There were and have never been any facts that support this conspiracy theory, but that didn't stop 1 in 4 Americans from believing it. So accept that beliefs are the foundation of society. See progress as a process of persuasion, not epiphany. People care about what they think affects their lives, and it doesn't always matter if they're right. That's why people struggle to care about or even believe in true things that don't have clearly visible impacts on their lives, like climate change. It's also why people have no trouble caring about and believing in false things that seem to impact their lives. Let's go back to coronavirus as an example. It's an invisible assassin, so many people are able to convince themselves that it's not real. Imagine if instead a foreign army had invaded the United States and shot as many Americans as the virus has killed. Not a single person would doubt the reality of that threat. And if top military officials told us we could stop the invaders by wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart, we all would have done so in a heartbeat. But people struggle to do this with COVID-19 because the virus isn't visible or antagonistic or infecting their lives in ways they can easily recognize. Sadly, people feel they need to see it to believe it. Truth number 7. Specifics lend legitimacy, citations lend authority. The liars you know aren't very good at it. The most dangerous liars weaponize the appearance of legitimacy so that you never even know you're being deceived. As they say, the best actors go straight to politics. So avoid blindly accepting specifics and citations as proxies for correctness. For example, both sides of the climate change debate will present you with data and sources, but these may be cherry-picked or made up. Do your own research, and you'll find that the reality of climate change is obvious and clear. Truth number 8. Fiction is not far from fact. Understand how easy it is to misconstrue information, even accidentally. Think of truth as a mountain. It's hard to climb up and easy to slip down the slopes. At the summit, you're in an unstable equilibrium. Any little breeze could knock you off, so you must work continually to stay on top of the truth. As an example of how hard this is, consider the foot-in-the-door technique, a classic method of political influence. A famous study by Stanford psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser shows that, quote, once someone has agreed to a small request, he is more likely to comply with a larger request. They tested this by comparing two groups of people. For the first group, they asked people to put up a very large lawn sign supporting safe driving. For the second group, they asked people to put up a small sign, and then later asked them to put up a very large sign. People in the second group who agreed to the small sign were far more likely to put up the large sign, since they'd already agreed to a small request. This is how influence operates, in tiny, imperceptible steps, or as T.S. Eliot put it in The Hollow Men, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. Truth number 9, lying is easier than fact-checking. Slow down. Be patient and reserve judgment. Falsehoods appear immediately, but truth always emerges in time. Liars try to keep you in the present, never having any time to think in any depth about what they said before. Resist their efforts to distract you, because distraction begets inaction. For example, when you see breaking news, understand that the news network's main motivation is to be first, to beat out other networks. It's not to inform you. You really could find out in a few hours or days and your life would be just fine. When it's breaking news, even the network hasn't had much time to check the facts and think things through. So do your best to ignore news while it's breaking. Truth number 10, deduction can delude. Question your assumptions, not just your logic. Educated people in particular tend to focus too much on logic, like a lawyer who can make an equally good argument for both sides. When people disagree, try to focus less on their chain of reasoning and more on their underlying assumptions. This is also a good approach to changing someone's mind. If you can point out a flawed assumption, the person's entire argument, no matter how elaborate, simply collapses. Truth number 11, there are far more falsehoods than facts. Consider truth as a rare element, precious to find and impossible to forge. Like looking for diamonds in the rough, it's difficult but worth it. Because truth is so rare, be relentlessly skeptical about what people tell you. Almost everything is sound and fury, signifying nothing. Truth number 12, what cannot be proven often cannot be disproven. Let go of the desire for 100% certainty, which is impossible to reach, but also let go of the temptation to resort to 50 or 0%. When you're unsure of something, don't just throw up your hands and say it's a coin toss. For example, consider the central question of the climate change debate. Is human activity causing a dangerous increase in global temperature? The answer is yes, but no scientist will ever tell you it's 100% certain. In fact, anyone who tells you so is definitely wrong. This approach to determining what's true is more familiar, though, than you may realize. To convict someone of a criminal offense, the judge asks the jury if they've reached a conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, any doubt that remains is unreasonable, just like doubt about climate change. The legal system acknowledges that we can never be 100% certain, but that doesn't prevent us from making judgments. Truth number 13, irrelevance is worse than infamy. Defeat charlatans by ignoring rather than fighting them. Deny them the attention they seek. For example, if you're a college student who despises a controversial figure someone invited to speak on campus, consider not talking about them at all. You may decide, of course, that it's important to show your disapproval by protesting, but recognize that it may have the opposite effect you think it will. Truth number 14, psychology can work in reverse. When you sense that someone's intentions aren't what they seem, consider first if they're opposite. People aren't good at nuance, so they often try to hide behind the exact reverse. For example, people who are insecure often act extremely overtly confident. There's a terrified little boy hiding behind every aggressive alpha male. Truth number 15, statistics obscure the source. Be wary of simplifications. The world is complex. It's perfectly okay to not know and reserve judgment. For example, when politicians cite GDP growth as how the economy is doing,
they say, talk about your economic success. Talk about 33.1%, the greatest in history. Now, look, if I do, how many times can I say it? I'll say it 5 or 6 times during the speech, 33.1.
Remind yourself that it's absurdly more complicated than that single number. Not everything can be condensed into statistics and remain true. A great year, as measured in GDP growth, might have been a terrible year for most people, or it might have been the result of excessive short-term spending, or it might reflect an outdated definition of GDP. Truth number 16, you can deceive without lying. Look for what's missing. There are half-truths and misdirections everywhere. Use your intuition to gauge how trustworthy someone is rather than waiting for the smoking gun, which may never appear. The best liars never lie so obviously. Most Nixons aren't dumb enough to record their crimes on tape. Truth number 17, bizarre is better than banal. Be covetous of your attention, since everyone in the world is trying to take it from you. Know that what's most recognizable is not necessarily what's best or worst. Understand that many of the most important issues are boring and go unnoticed. Fake news tries to get your attention and prompt outrage by showing you the most extreme content possible. But what actually matters is the realest news of all, C-SPAN, which would put you to sleep. Truth number 18, what you cannot find does not exist. People trying to deceive you are counting on the fact that you won't look into things, so investigate more deeply than they expect you to. In this world run by recommendation algorithms, try hard to expose yourself to new ideas, uncurated content, information that takes effort to find. Many of us self-censor by simply not working hard enough to break out of our bubbles. Truth number 19, we listen to what we want to hear. Expose yourself to what's unfamiliar and take pride in being able to handle discomfort, because comfort leads to stagnation. For example, try reading the random Wikipedia article of the day, which won't be tailored to your existing interests. Accept that this will be less immediately likable than what's fed to you by the confirmation bias machine of the internet. Most importantly, be suspicious of recommended content, and never let just one algorithm or company or person, even yourself, totally determine what content you consume. Truth number 20, bans mean business. Outlaws have always been and will always be cool, so don't make outlaws out of criminals. When someone writes an inflammatory tell-all book, try to trust people more to see through the lies. Let people come to their own judgments, rather than imposing your own, which will surely backfire. People believe, rightly or wrongly, that those who resist vehemently have something to hide, so let them see your restraint as evidence of your integrity. Truth number 21, fiction is more fun than fact. Distinguish what's entertaining from what's informative. They're not the same. For example, admit that the Jon Stewarts and Bill O'Reillys of the world are comedians and editorialists, not journalists. Whether they're just trying to make you laugh or have a long-term political agenda, they're not telling you how it really is. If you insist on watching political entertainment and not the news, at least admit that you're not informed. It's okay, we all need comic relief, and we don't all need to be plugged in all the time. But at least be honest with yourself. Consuming fake news is like eating a candy bar. You'll get a sugar high, but will soon feel exhausted. Consuming real news is like eating granola. It's not as immediately delicious, but it will keep you nourished for the long run. Truth number 22, prediction can be prophecy. Work to change people's attitudes and expectations, which are often just as important as the cold hard facts. People's beliefs are not independent from reality, they affect it. For example, several foreign countries, most notably Russia, are working around the clock to discredit the 2020 US election. There's a deep insight motivating their efforts. In an election, perception of security is security. Undermining the legitimacy of an election doesn't require hacking into voting machines and changing votes. It's simply a matter of convincing enough people that the results aren't valid. An election is legitimate if enough people believe it was, regardless of whether it actually was or not. Truth number 23, frequency is validity. Promote relentlessly the values of accuracy and truth. In a democracy like ours here in America, the vocal minority run the show. So either state your case and say it loud, or stop complaining. You have to speak up to be heard. I created a platform called Be Heard for this very reason. It makes it super easy to send a message to your representatives in government, from the president down to your superintendent of public education. Check it out at weshouldbeheard.org. Truth number 24, shamelessness is a superpower. Don't expect con artists to grow a conscience. Recognize that not everyone is motivated by the same thing. Those who are shameless don't have the fear and embarrassment you do. So don't resist them by trying to make them afraid or embarrassed. Instead, look for their true motivations and deny them. Truth number 25, curiosity is killer. Realize that curiosity and skepticism are not mutually exclusive. Let your curiosity guide you to new ideas, but allow your skepticism to sort through them. Try to notice how others are incentivized to use your curiosity. For example, consider the business models of Facebook and Netflix. Both of these services are considered addictive, but only Facebook is seen in such a negative light. Why? Well, you don't pay for Facebook. Advertisers pay Facebook for you, for your attention. Facebook's incentive is to keep you constantly looking at the site, seeing new ads every time. They get paid by addicting you, and the stronger the addiction, the better. Behind every Facebook screen, there are tens of thousands of engineers whose only job is to make you endlessly and destructively curious. Netflix is addictive too, but in a much less severe way. You pay for Netflix on a monthly subscription. If you watch 1 hour a month or 100 hours a month, they get paid the same. This means it's more in their interest to satisfy you over the long term, so you keep your subscription active. They want you to be curious enough to watch, but not so curious that you hate yourself for doing so. Truth number 26, confidence creates confidence. Be more suspicious of those with total conviction and more charitable to those without it. Remember Socrates, the wisest among us are those who admit how little they know. The confident salesperson is usually more convincing, but the unassertive scientist is usually more correct. This is especially true of the political issues fake news traffics in. Any statement without nuance or qualification is likely wrong. As human beings, we tend to be attracted to those with confidence, like the countless strongmen autocrats of history. We're too quick to equate humility and hesitancy with incompetence. Truth number 27, you cannot escape your own perspective. Because you can't escape it, expand your perspective with empathy and experience. Imagine what it's like to be someone very different from yourself. Travel to places you've never been. The wider your range of experiences, the more resistant you will be to fake news and influence. Here's a fascinating example of expanding your perspective. A team of psychologists in Spain developed a virtual reality experiment that works as follows. You enter the virtual world and you find yourself facing none other than Sigmund Freud, and you're instructed to describe a personal problem that's bothering you to him. You do so, and then the world shifts and you become Freud, looking at yourself saying what you just said. You're instructed to give yourself advice as Freud, and then the world shifts and you're you again. The conversation goes on like this, back and forth between you and you as Freud. One person described this experience as akin to the moment of realizing as a child that your parents are just people, no different than the rest of humanity. This virtual reality experiment lets you see yourself as just a person. It makes your own frailties and biases as obvious as those of another soul, expanding your perspective and making you more resilient. Truth number 28, superlatives are superior. Catch people's attention with superlatives and back them up with reality. It's not that people aren't capable of understanding nuance, and it's not that they're totally disinterested in it. It's that their time is spread so thin across the enormous number of priorities in their lives that they'll never even begin the process of thinking through something unless you attract their attention with a shiny superlative. Truth number 29, there is an audience for everything. Accept that some people will always believe crazy things, but also recognize that there are many people eager for truth who simply don't know how to find it. You're not alone in wanting to fight fake news, and understanding how it works makes you more able to do so. The key is not letting the tiny minority of people who believe truly insane things to control the conversation. Truth number 30, there is no objective meaning. See meaning as human, not divine, relative, not absolute. Resist the urge to just release information to the world and expect people to understand what you mean. You have to work, and work extremely hard to communicate the meaning you want. Truth number 31, bias is baseline. Stop believing that you're rational, but work hard to be more so. The first step in overcoming any problem is acknowledging that the problem exists. This simple act of naming a phenomenon, putting a label on it, is extremely helpful. It's impossible to fight an amorphous gist of what's going on, but once you can call it zero-sum bias or stereotyping or the ostrich effect, it's easier to understand and resist. And that's the purpose of this series, to identify the truths of fake news so that we can fight it more effectively. Thank you for watching The Truths of Fake News. I hope this series has been both entertaining and informative. I'm releasing this video the day before the 2020 US presidential election. If you're an American, please vote, and vote for truth, because it desperately needs your support. Thank you. If you're new to The Truths of Fake News, start here. Subscribe to Revisionist Future. Click the link in the description to buy your very own Make America Safe Again face mask. It helps stop the spread of fake news and other viral content. There's also a Make America America Again hat. Thank you for watching.